Hello from BI Consulting Services. Thank you guys for tuning in today. I want to first and foremost apologize for the lack of content here recently, but we appreciate you guys staying engaged. As you know, COVID-19 kind of hit us pretty hard over the past few months, so I hope you and your family are safe and healthy. And again, we appreciate you guys tuning in, even though there's been a bit of a lull. So if you guys remember in our last YouTube video, we discussed talking about PowerApps and the full Power Platform option. So that's Flow, Power BI, and PowerApps. So today we're going to spend most of our time on that PowerApp functionality, but we're going to touch on all those different components of this Power Platform. So hopefully you guys find this content engaging. Also, if you can't tell, I really want you guys to subscribe to our channel. We have about 30,000 views to our YouTube channel, actually a little bit more than that. But we want you guys to subscribe to our content. Also, if you put a comment down below, we will also, if you have a question or if there's a topic that you want us to cover, we will cover that. So as a part of that, if you're a subscriber on our channel, we want to make sure the content is relevant to what you guys want to be able to talk or learn about via this platform. So if there's anything that you want to hear from us on, feel free to subscribe and leave a comment down below, and we will get to it in an upcoming video. So today we're going to talk about how to create an HR management app, and this app is going to be extremely high level, but it's going to be a good example to kind of get you guys thinking about how you could use it at your organization and how it can be of benefit. Now, please note I've grabbed every single one of these images off the internet, so think nothing of the fact that these are, Mark Zuckerberg and, all these different folks that we all probably know fairly well. I just pulled all these off the internet and leveraged them as examples. This content in this report is pretty interesting because if you don't know how to add images, now that's definitely a video in and of itself, but I will say Curveball does some interesting video content on how to leverage images inside of your reports. So I recommend you go look that up if you have time. That's exactly what I did in this example. I think she leveraged some content that she learned about from someone else, and then I leveraged that same exact logic to build this out. But if you're interested and you want to know about it and that content doesn't help you, give me a shout and I'm happy to do so. So this is going to be the end output, an HR management report. So it's very high level details in this example, but let me take you through how to do that. So in addition to this Power BI report, we're actually going to have a Power App associated with it. So if you click this Power App icon, which is going to be the one that I take you guys through in a little bit of detail, you're going to have our HR management app. So if you click that add button, it's going to take you through a whole bunch of details that you can enter into this app and then submit. And it's actually going to land in a SharePoint site. So if you guys are familiar with all of our other YouTube videos, we usually use this YouTube videos SharePoint site to do so. So in this example, I'm using this employee and HR data list. So the very first step to creating your Power App that you can then feed into a Power BI report and then you can integrate with Flow is to create a list in this example. So it's very straightforward. On the home page of your SharePoint site, you would just create new list, give it a name, and I've already created a test one that we're not going to talk about much in this example, but I wanted to show you. But you can give it a name and a description and hit save. It'll create that test location. It'll come out looking something like this. The only difference here is that I've renamed this. Once you create your list, it's always going to have a title. So I changed that title to something else in all of my examples because I typically don't need titles, but it's a required field from what I know. If I'm wrong, you guys let me know and I can definitely update that going forward. But from what I know, that field is required. You can't delete it. So I typically rename it and use it for something else in my content. So here you can add whatever columns you want, choice columns, which there will be some examples of in the app that I've created. You can use just number columns, columns that will require numerical values. You can have a date column, which I do use inside this report example or in this Power App example as well as single and multi-line text options. So there's a wide array of options available within your Power App. So when you're thinking about how could I use a Power App? Well, there's a number of reasons. HR management. So if you're a small company and you want a way to manage all of your employees, one thing that you can do is, on top of having this employee and HR data list file, you can have your employees, as they start in the organization, fill out a couple of key components. So let's say you want just their name, their office location, their phone number, and an image, so that you can use that image inside of your reporting, just like I've done in the example that I showed you in Power BI. They can take those images, store them out here in the SharePoint site. You might want to have their employee, well, actually, you definitely probably want to have their employee ID number as well, so that you have a unique identifier to segue back to as you're doing mapping and relationship mapping between your probably more confidential HR data. So you can do that. You can also use it for, let's say, inspections. Maybe you work in the construction industry and you have folks who go out and inspect sites. Well, you can use that to take images, put in key notes, talk about the site a little bit. Any details that you would typically maybe just put in your phone or write on paper, you can now integrate inside of PowerApps and inside of your SharePoint list. So there are really a ton of things that you can do with these lists and then build out apps on. Excuse me. But in this example, I've used something very high level. So if you go to our employee and HR data list, you can see here again, I've changed that title to notes in this example. I have a headcount value, an employee ID, whether folks are hourly or salary, an organization, a start and an end date, as well as their last performance view. What was their ranking on a scale from 0 to 10? So this is the information I'm actually going to use inside of the Power App. So up here, you're going to notice a couple of things. I'm going to tell you I never use these options like create an app. It will actually start to build the app out for you, and I typically like to start from scratch. So instead of going through this option, which I think if you go to see all apps, it'll take you where I'm going to show you now. But nevertheless, I usually just go through, again, from this office location. I'll go straight into the Power Apps option. And from there, I start to build out my app. And here I'm going to show you how to do this kind of high level. It may not have the exact same UI and the backgrounds. I'm going to try and do it very, very similar just to take you guys through it, in a full example. But if I skip a step, it's just because I want to make sure I get this content to you as quickly as possible. So here I usually go to create a Canvas app from blank. I give it a name. I hit create. And then I'll hit this create a form option. And all this does is really give me the base UI that I'm going to need for this entire form. So the first thing I want to do is just give it a background image, which I think will be helpful. So let's go with this HR data image 2. All right, and then let's connect to data. So in this connectors options, I'm going to go to the SharePoint. Once we get in here, it's going to show you a list of all the things that you can connect to within your SharePoint site. Typically doesn't take too long to connect. There we go. So I'll go to the YouTube videos icon, and so it's going to show you again the test that I created earlier just for this, as well as the employee and HR data and any other list sets that you have out here and your document section. So I've created a list specific to this, so I'm going to connect to it. Once you hit that connect option, you do have to go over here to your data source for this particular form and plug into it. Once you do that, all those fields are going to load inside of your app. That simple. So the very first step is just immensely simple. So a couple of things that you can do, I guess, to sort of just clean up your report a bit if you want. Again, not requirements, nothing that you absolutely have to do, but you can sort of add additional components here if you want. Maybe you want to add a header. So you could just create a label. Call it your HR management application. expand it out quite a bit just to make it larger. Let's go up just a bit more, maybe 30. We'll make it bold. And then if you wanted to, you can, of course, change the color. So in this case, since most of our stuff's on blues, I'm just going to flip this from black to blue. And it's a very dark blue. All right, perfect. And then if you want, you can sort of change the alignments. Maybe you want it to be centered. There you go. So this sort of connects to that. So if you go over here to your tree view, it's kind of just telling you the components that are associated with your app at this moment in time. So I think that's important to note. And one thing I'm going to do is actually trim this up a bit and make sure it's fully centered. It looks a little bit off. Awesome. All right, perfect. So right now there's only this one main screen. So let's call this your HR management. So this is sort of your main component of your entire report. If you wanted, you can do a couple of other things. Maybe add a blank screen at the top and a success screen. So I'm going to add the success screen at the end that says, you know, your HR details submittal confirmation. Or let's just call it submittal confirmation. It's a little bit less wordy. Perfect. And here again, you can add a background image. Let's stick with the same image. I'm going to change this again to something larger, bold, and let's go from black to that dark blue. And that dark blue is so dark, sometimes I just want to make sure I've definitely flipped it over. All right, cool. So yeah, pretty straightforward. One other thing that I'm going to do is just make this a bit bigger. And then expand this out a bit. That's good for the sake of time. And then let's make sure this is aligned in the center. Perfect. Let's take this and align it in the center. Awesome. And then the very last step I'm going to take here is just to change this to that dark blue also, just for consistency's sake. So this can be the submittal page to this report page here. So there's a couple of things you can do. Another thing that I probably would recommend is just having a welcome screen. It kind of just helps people orient themselves as they get onto the report page. So I'm going to move this up just a bit to the very top because it's going to be the first step. We'll call it welcome. And here you can just insert a text label. And we will just say something like, click below to start your HR submittal. Nothing too crazy, not tons of details, but just a good way for you to welcome folks and orient them to the app itself. So let's make this a bit larger. Perfect. And then we will also align this in the center. Just something I like to do every single time and I'm building out anything is just make sure everything's aligned. We will, for consistency's sake, make this the dark blue. I think that changed. It's sometimes quite hard to tell what color I've chosen, but I think that's good. Let's make this a 5. Perfect. All right, so you can click below to start your submittal. So we'll have that there, and then let's just insert an add icon for this particular component. We'll make sure it's centered. Awesome. We'll make sure the color on this one is pretty dark also. Perfect. All right, so we'll add just the exact same background just for consistency's sake in this example. So then if they wanted to, so the one thing you will need to do here is tell people what they're going to go to, right? So on that, select what's going to actually happen. So for this one, there's a couple of things you'll want to do. And let me go to my, perfect. I want to make sure I know what the name of each one of these are because it's actually very important. So this on select, so when they select that add icon, what do you want them to do? So there's a few steps you have to do. So you want to make sure that the form itself is reset. It should be just form 1. And typically it will pop up for you. If it doesn't, then you just have to type it in. But typically if you're creating your very first form in here and there's not multiple forms, then it would just automatically be that form 1. Then you're going to tell it, hey, I want this to be a new form. Again, on that form 1. And then just where to navigate. So in this case, it's going to be that HR management app. Oops. And then you'll put in cover. All right, so in theory, what I like to do as I'm building out any of these is just test out whatever I'm doing, make sure it works. So I'm going to hit the add button, and as you can see, it automatically takes us to that form that we just created. So a couple of other things I like to do as I'm doing this is just have a checkbox. So once people do their submittal, you can add a checkbox to the very end here. And again, for consistency, I just try to make sure all the colors kind of line up. It's hard to tell that this is a dark blue, but I am clicking the dark blue. Yep, it works. Hard to tell, it's so dark, it's almost black. All right, so perfect. So there you can have that. And then the other thing that you can do is hit an X, have an X. And I typically make my, X's sort of usually like something that will help people sort of be oriented with whatever details are there. All right, perfect. Okay, so there's two, final steps to this just to make sure that your check marks and your X's sort of work the way you want them to. So you want to tell them what each one of them do. So if someone hits this X, you really want it to reset the form because clearly there's something wrong. They want to start over. And then you want there to be a new form. Okay, perfect. And then if everything goes well, you want them to go somewhere, right? So you want to submit the form. That's the first step. But on top of that, you want to make sure that once that submittal's done, you clear out any old content that was submitted by that person. And then the last step is, let's go ahead and navigate to that confirmation screen so they know that they have actually completed something inside this form. So we'll go ahead and we'll build out those components as well. So submit. And again, it's pretty cool. Most of this content will automatically start to come in for you, which is pretty awesome. It makes it, sorry about that, makes it easy for you to make sure you're on track because it just automatically starts to do it for you. Okay, awesome. So just one other thing that you may have noticed as we were going through this, I messed up a couple of times and you'd see an X. So if you see an X anywhere inside of your app, you've done something wrong, more than likely. We won't go into details about what potentially would have went wrong, but nevertheless, you probably got something mistakenly inputted inside your form. So just an FYI on that. All right, so if I went through this entire process, and if we do, I think it's actually going to probably create a line on our HR employee and HR data list inside SharePoint. But let's go ahead and just run through this and see if I messed up on anything as I was showing you guys how to create this app. So there's an add icon, the title here. Let me just show you one other step actually before we get there. So in my example, as you remember, I changed the title to notes, but you'll probably notice here in this example that it's not actually named notes, right? And that's just because It still takes that name that was actually inside of SharePoint, which can sometimes be quite tricky. But in this case, we'll go ahead and take you through how to go ahead and change that if you need to. All right, so here I'm going to go ahead and just title this Notes. All right, so very simple, just changing the name of that to whatever was typically inside that SharePoint site before. So you'll notice that it did show up as title, even though I changed that name from title to a different field. It's still showing up a bit different here inside of the Power App, which is not a problem. You'll just want to rename it. It's very simple to do so. Just make sure you double click inside that value where it's card title, and then just make sure you're under the text option and change it there. It may make you try and like unlock content. If you remember just a second ago, and I kind of went through that pretty quickly, I had to unlock the content. I typically always have to do that. It may not let you change it unless you do. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and go here. I'm going to hit the play icon. I'm going to add, I'm going to put in test. And if you try and write in numerical values in these values that are expected to be numbers, it will fail out on you, just so you know. So, you know, if you want it to be ABC 1, 2, 3, allow for both numerical and alpha characters, you may want to make sure you don't make it a number. So here's a drop down option. So again, as I was building out this list, one thing I did was set it up to be a choice option. So in doing so, it actually sort of gives you that dynamic functionality inside here. And it will show you which fields are required, which ones are not. And then just another drop down. So once you hit that submit button, you're done. You'll get a, hey, this was successfully submitted. One thing I'm going to do just out of curiosity is see if this one went through on the site. So let's refresh this. And because this screen is a little bit low, you can see here that test one that we just submitted is now inside the database. So it works pretty seamlessly. And then sort of that final step here is, let's go to Power BI. Let's refresh this report. And what we should see is that we'll add an additional value to it. So there's 13, 20, and 15. This went up to 21, so this is where the value sits. And if we go over here, that test value that we just created should pop up. There it is. So this is the test value that was just submitted. And there we go. So very high level, I know, but again, it gives you sort of the idea of how this functionality works inside of Flow or inside of PowerApps. And then sort of that final step is Flow. So in this example, I did something very straightforward, right? I didn't go into a ton of details on this one. I wanted to make it as simplistic as possible, but what you can do is create a flow associated with your PowerApp. So in this example, actually what I did was set up an email so that an email would come out to me for the particular PowerApp that was created, just so I would know when something changed inside of this database. So I went here to the Power Automate section and created a flow, and then the process is very straightforward, but sent a customized email is the one that I chose in this example, but you can do a ton of different things. You can actually request someone approve this content. So let's say you're constantly adding in all these details and building out sort of this HR database. And a part of this functionality is succession planning. So maybe you want someone else to review and approve it before it goes live in the data that you're sharing. You can submit an approval process for this. In my example, I just wanted to be notified. I wanted to be notified when a new submittal was actually entered into the system. And so I just went here and went through a few different steps, very straightforward. All you have to do is make sure you're signed in and authenticated. Once you do, and so you can see here, everything's set, you can just hit that create flow, And I actually already got the email. I see it right here in my inbox where a new item was added in the system. So once you hit this create flow icon, it's going to show you that, every time a new submittal is done, you're going to get a notification on that. So pretty straightforward process and an awesome way for you to stay involved in the process and make sure that it's successful. So let's say you create a flow for something like inspections. Well, you want to make sure those things are working and that people are actually following the process that you guys put in place. And a good way to do that is to set up notifications to come out to you when they're actually submitted. So if for a week you notice there's no submittals happening, then maybe you want to sort of regroup with your team and make sure this is the most efficient way to create these inspection forms. So if you're using any sort of form or manual process to build out something, I highly recommend you think of a way maybe for you to be able to build out something inside of PowerApps. It's a very intuitive and simple process for you, and it integrates seamlessly with SharePoint, and all this is free of cost. So you don't have to use, there's not tons of cost associated with starting this process up and building out apps for your team across your organization to leverage and use. It is absolutely free. Now, if you start connecting to SQL servers or more complex locations, there is cost associated with that. But I will tell you that for most organizations, I think you're going to see a lot of benefit in just having this built-in functionality where you can get to your data. There are ways for you to just set up jobs. Maybe you do need to get data from a SQL database. Set up a job to where it emails out to you directly. Flow will pick up that email and put it in a location for you. So maybe you want that in email or in SharePoint or on a file folder. There's all this different functionality that you can use. So don't think that you're prohibited depending on where your data sits. It's definitely a tool that can be leveraged no matter the case. So I hope that you guys appreciated this data and content. Again, didn't go through a ton of detail on the actual report side. If you want to know how I got this detail here, feel free to send a comment down below and we will definitely get into that details if you need it. And again, if you haven't forgot, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Email us with any questions, and as always, our website is there as well. We put all of our YouTube content typically on our website. But again, subscribe. And I will say, just so you know, on our website right now, there's a Google Analytics report that we just recently built out that we're starting to share with folks across all of our different platforms. Go out, take a look at that example report. If you like what you see, there's a few steps you can take to actually get that exact report for free. So if you come to our YouTube channel, again, and subscribe, which is very important, and then like a post, and then comment on that post, we are giving that report away for free. So we are actually selling it on our website for $150, but you can get that entire report for free if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, like a video, and comment on a video. And then once you get done with all that, go back to our website, contact us, put in your business information and your contact details. We will set up a 15-minute, 30-minute meeting with you and take you through how to map this Google Analytics report directly to your data set, and then you can start to use it and derive some insight. Hopefully you find that helpful. I realize there's quite a few steps to that process, but we didn't want to make, a report we're selling completely free. So we wanted to give you guys the opportunity to go through it if you're interested. So follow those steps and subscribe to our channel, comment, like, email us, and we will give you that report for free. If you have any questions or if you want us to talk about something else in an upcoming video, please let us know. We are eager to provide content that is helpful to you. So give us any details in the comments below. Shoot us an email directly through our website. And again, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate you guys watching our videos. We think they're helpful. So the very next step is just subscribe. Thank you very much.